Um, Welcome to my warts and all work in progress presentation. I've got two apparently unrelated themes. The first is how to use triads to to lengthen your lines and bring kind of air into them so that they're easy to hear. I think if you play in a way which is very scaly, which does not imply that you're using scales or anything like that. I mean, you may be or you may not be, but the point is that your notes are quite close together all the time. And they go in kind of consecutive, they go consecutively up and down a lot. Then I think that you generate a kind of stuffy sound, which is hard for your ear to kind of get hold of, and it can make things dense in a kind of bad way and a bit too sort of twisty and turny. I like to try to use one of the reasons the triads seem to be so appealing to me is that they enable me to make lines that go a long way in the same direction and which aren't stuffy but have kind of air in and are easy to hear. The sound comes across nicely. And the other thing is the hat, which is a new hat. And I thought this was the best way to give it the exposure it deserves. And it'll bring a certain sort of continuity and interest to the video that I think it would otherwise lack. But anyway, let's show you the sort of thing that I mean. I'm going to use ornithology as the basis for the examples. So that was one half of the tune, and I'm thinking of this triad, which is a triad built from the tonic of the G major sound. But I think it's important, I think it's critical that we don't think of these triads as coming out of the major sound, but out of the relative minor sound. This is the door that Garrison Fuel opened for me and for many others, I'm sure, and he deserves a mention for all the help that he's provided. We build the triads like this from the relative minor, which in this case is E minor. So those are the triads, and we build them off the tonic, the third, the fifth, the seventh, and then back to the tonic. And I'm just topping and tailing them and playing them as a triplet. One of these triads, they not only bring a certain kind of harmonic space into the playing and enable you to build longer lines, they also provide rhythmical variety, because it's so easy to play them as triplets. One must do that all the time, but a lot of the time I think it works very well. And I've organised them so as they're arranged on adjacent strings, so I can sweep pick them. This is I think one of the great features of Garrison Fuel's teaching, that it combines this sort of vocabulary or idea-based approach with a very physical dimension, which is absolutely critical. If you learn these triads all over the neck on adjacent strings, they enable you to pepper your playing with triplets and perhaps triplet fragments when you get more sophisticated, and it brings rhythmical air, if you like, into your playing as well. So I've arranged them all on adjacent strings so I can sweep pick both ways. I've heard eminent people, I can't remember who, but saying that they almost always use triplets up the way because they generate a better feel. These people know what they're talking about. I use them descending as much as ascending. I may end up deciding that's a bad thing, but at the moment I do. So there, because I'm using the same fingering pattern, I'm playing. So we've got two sets of minor sounds, if you like, that we're combining. And one of the things that it's very nice to do, which I did with a couple of those early ideas, was you can see that you can target a single note of the new colour, the new nice sound that you're moving towards, and it's very effective. I did that with the first sort of version. And now that last note is the minor third. Of the next sound. So it's the minor third of the G minor sound. So I'm going from G major to G minor, but I'm just using the very last note of the phrase to signal that change. And then maybe of the next sound. And now we've got so we've got a kind of minor 2/5 now, and I'm now the two sounds that I'm going to be thinking of are the melodic minor sound rather than the straight minor sound, and I'm going to be building triads off that. So. Oh, wrong. This is the one built off the major 7th. sharpened 7th, instead of, E flat minor 6th. Instead of, to find the triads, instead of thinking of the dominant chord, the straight dominant chord, I'm thinking of a minor 6th chord built a semitone above the root of the dominant chord. It sounds so heavy, God. As a melodic minor sound. Now this won't get me every aspect of the altered dominant sound, but it gets me in the ballpark, and that's all I need to start with. I want to get up and running with this rhythmically up and running. And so I don't mind if the materials that I use are somewhat simplified. I don't mind that at this stage. You know, I've only been doing it 20 odd years, so you know, early days, baby steps. So this is the method of using the way of finding all the triads is to use the relative minor of the major sound. To use I'm using the G minor to cover the C7 chord. I'm not all of the harmonic material I want is there in this minor sound. So let me try and maybe include that sound more, because in the last phrases that I've played, I've just taken one note from it, or maybe the shortest phrase. But let's see if I can extend that phrase a bit. There I played a little bit more out of the minor sound, that the G minor sound. And I also played a single note from the next sound that we need to talk about. So far, for the first chunk, we're just dealing with two sounds, and they're both minor sounds. The only thing that differentiates them is their absolute pitch. I'm using an E minor sound and then a G minor sound. And then when we come to the last cadence, I'm using the melodic minor sound. Well, now, in order to bring more colour to the first section, I'm going to use the melodic minor sound again. And this is not news to an enormous number of you, I'm sure. But instead of playing the way that I'm going to access this sound is by playing a melodic minor chord a semitone above the root of the dominant. So the way I'm going to play D flat minor 6th with a sharpened 7th instead of C7. And I did that last time like this. So here's the idea over G major. And that note there is one note of the altered dominant sound. And again, you can, magically enough, you can access more altered dominant colours by building a minor 6th chord off the 4th degree of the home sound too. So instead of, you've got this, if I'm wanting an altered dominant sound in F, then I can either go for D flat minor 6th, or I can go for B flat minor 6th, which is built off the 4th degree of F major. the F major sound. Here's the altered. So all of those techniques are available, and they're all very easy to. It's very easy to find the triads that you can use to bring this air and this sort of continuity to the line. Obviously, it's important. I'm using repetition over octaves in order to lengthen the line. So in a way, this is the kind of most obvious thing that I'm doing, sticking with this phrase that's starting to get boring now, but let's stick with it. So, so there I'm kind of repeating it. So it's halfway through the third repetition that we get this change, which is, I think, part of why it sticks out so much and works as well as it does. But I'm using repetition. Let me just give you a very simple example. One of the things that I'm not doing is kind of using a couple of these triads to. The great thing about them is that they're bringing significant harmonic structure within a sound. So instead of generating harmonic interest at the change, and only at the change when you move from one sound to another, the triads give you an opportunity to bring harmonic structure to a single sound. And it's not the same as the sort of structure that you get when you change sounds, but it's still some kind of structure. There's almost these different dimensions. You've got like dimension 1 of the sound, dimension 2, dimension 3. Oh, what am I doing? God, that's terrible. And all of those can be used within that sound, and they're increasingly colourful the further you get away, if you like, from the tonic, I think. And the one that's built off the 7th is quite hard to use, but I'm not worrying about that right now. But the first 2 or 3 are very, very usable. So that's the sort of thing I mean. That's moving within a sound, creating harmonic movement within a sound. I think it's absolutely critical for generating the sort of interest that you need. Now the other thing that I want to say about this. It's quite complicated, given the last point that I've made. There's a moment in a Joe Pass video that I saw a long, long time ago, very early on, where he says you can always use the dominant as a kind of pivot. And that always struck me as like, oh wow, that's just so hugely important. And it is, especially I think if you're thinking about targeting, because in order to target, say, one of the important melody notes in this sort of sound, you need to get away from the sound. You can't fire an arrow at a target if it's already in the target. There's you need some distance for targeting, and then there's a good example. It's a boring example. Now, these are all notes that are, you could think of them as G melodic minor notes, if you like, but these are notes from this dominant sound, and I'm targeting the tonic. So the most common sound to use to get this harmonic distance is, of course, the 5 sound, the sound that I've just illustrated. But you can use the 4 sound too, which is the 2 sound in disguise, or whichever way round you want to go. So you can use the 4 sound too, and this is peculiarly productive, I think. So that's the 1 sound, but I'm referencing the 4 sound. That is part of the 4 sound, and that's the tonic of the 4 sound. And it gives me, within a sound, another way of generating structure and interest within a sound. Except this way does involve actually not just unpacking the kind of harmonic content of the sound with the triads, but using the triads of the 4 chord, or the 2 chord, the 4 chord, in order to get some distance on the 1 chord. And I find that it works beautifully. This is a phrase Parker uses at the beginning of one of his choruses on ornithology. So I see that. This is the triad. It's just that. That is a reference to the 4 sound. And so's that. Back to the 1 sound. Oh, well, maybe not. Because that's another one. Even that, just that, is from this sound. And the more I play that cadence, the more I think it's just right at the heart of the music. I just think that's got to be the sound. Of course, you've got, now here's the altered dominant sound. That's the altered dominant sound that you get by putting the 4, the melodic minor on the 4th degree of the scale. So there are a series of ways in which you can use triads, using minor sounds to generate the triads. And I made the point at the end that that you've got the point that the reason they're so important is that they give you harmonic structure within a sound. And then I kind of amplified that point by saying that there's another way that you can get structure in there, and that's by referencing a different sound and using those triads. So that's from the C major sound over the G major sound. altogether, that adds up to a whole lot of interesting stuff. And I hope that that's useful to you. I know it's quite long, and I hope the hat did do something to relieve the kind of technical tedium of some of that. The connection with the hat, the only connection I can think of, is that the same bloke who spoke about all the triads is wearing the hat. But I'll work on something a bit more sort of satisfying than that and see if I can get back to you. Okay, comments welcome, and I hope that's of some help to people.